Hello, welcome to the Enchanted Kingdom of Hermione. I'm the Enchanted Kingdom's Lord Chamberlain. Zip gun, we're up here in the turret of pleasure, watching this World Cup on the highlights, which is always the better way to do it for me. And we're ruminating about passings of people. Now, I haven't been doing too many of these. They're kind of a bummer. Somebody dies every week. And, you get on there and you go, so-and-so died, so-and-so died. It's all... And I kind of thought, well, I can't not mention some of them. I don't necessarily need to mention all of them. So I'm going to mention the important ones and the ones you might have missed. And I'm going to start calling these deletions in honor of the delete bin, of which one of our people today helped pretty much invent it. But this last couple of weeks we've had 3 major figures in music pass. 2 of them you might never even have heard of. One of them you would have heard of for sure, because he made sure of it. And I'm going to take them in the order that they happened. And the first one was a guy who I've loved forever. I don't remember how I discovered his music. I think I just bought a record at random. This would have been in the early 70s. And I bought a record by this guy, and it was on it was on a label called JPO. And JPO was, and I gotta remember that I should have looked this up. JPO was an offshoot of ECM in the early days. And they put out a bunch of neat records. Jazz APO. Can't remember what it stood for. Anyways, I remember hearing about a guy named Dollar Brand. And I saw this record for sale in our local record emporium, Richard's Records. And I think I just sort of took a chance on it. And this is an absolutely A+ record. It is simply Dollar Brand, now later known as Abdullah Ibrahim. Playing his piano in a club in, I believe it's the Jazz House, Montmartre, Copenhagen. It's not a great recording. The piano sounds hard, and it sounds like it's been played on and soaked in whiskey. But it's fantastic, and it's continuous piano music, going everywhere from very deep gospel to very Ellingtonian sort of almost orchestrations, and then straight into the townships of South Africa with things in weird time signatures, sometimes one hand playing against the other rhythmically. Hypnotic, fantastic. And I've always loved him since. And every time I've had a chance, I'd grab a record if I could. And I got a couple. I'm going to just for this particular segment, I'm going to say, this is what I've got of these guys. Just handy. I don't have too many CDs by Dollar Brand, but this, look at this, 95 cents. I'm going to look this up later, but I'll bet it's worth some money. South Africa, I do believe this is his first record. Him and Victor Ntoni and Nelson Magwaza. And they do $4 Brand originals and a song called Shrimp Boats. And I don't know if these are in the right order. This is Arista Freedom Delete. Arista Freedom we'll mention later in the video. And this is him and Gato Barberi, the great raucous Argentinian tenor player who had his moment in the sun with Last Tango in Paris. And I sort of remember this being Okay, I haven't listened to this in a long time. Not the place to start for either of these guys. And then there's African Piano. This has come out on CD. This is JPO 60,002, and this is JPO 60,005. This one here. These are kind of sister records. They're both fantastic. Where's this one from? Oh, same place. October 22nd, 69, at the Jazz House. Oh, June 72. Oh, really? Okay. I didn't know that. Then you get some Inner City put this out. Ode to Duke Ellington. This is excellent. I have a wonderful French copy, I think it is, on Elektra of African Marketplace. This is maybe as close to the big time as he got as far as major labels go. It's an ambitious record. It's pretty darn good. His ambitious records don't grab me the way his solo records do. Just because. This one is pretty great. Whoops, am I doing this right? No. This one here. This is on a Swiss label, so if you're a vinyl nut, you're going to die. Because this is just about the best wax ever. There's 4 sides of him playing solo. One side C is mostly Ellington and Monk. Billy Strayhorn, Duke Ellington, Clifford Barris writing I Surrender Dear. All the rest is Dollar Brand, or by this point he was Abdullah Ibrahim. And this is for me it's a later one, but what year is it? 78. Okay, this is now I've got later ones on CD. He was on Inja, made a lot of records for Inja. I had African Space Program. I don't know what I do with it. Billy Higgins on drums, Ricky Ford on sax, Abdullah Ibrahim. I could have gone to see him a couple of years ago at the Chan Center. I think the tickets were $90. I worked it out. It was $500 for me to go see it. I just couldn't afford it. I'm glad I had these records. He was on a par as far as an innovator for piano, like Keith Jarrett was. His really weird stuff is never really weird. He got outside a little bit. African Space Program had some moments, but for the most part, it was really basic, from the heart, emotional music. And if you like jazz piano of any ilk, or South African music of any ilk, I highly recommend you check him out. Then, I think a couple of weeks later, another giant innovator who's very important to me passed away, and I sort of saw this coming because he was getting old and he was a very large man. But the amazing James Blood Ulmer has passed away. Guitarist with, originally kind of came, well, he played with Big John Patton. He's had a few Blue Notes, kind of normal sounding jazz player back in the day. He played with Big John Patton. I got a Big John Patton record with him on there, and he's good, but doesn't stick out as being amazing. But then he started to play with Ornette Coleman, and there's a whole lot of videos on YouTube of Blood Ulmer in the Ornette Coleman quartet, I think it was. And it's kind of, you can tell they're working it out. It's not actually great. It sounds, I don't know. It sounds like they don't really know what they're doing, and maybe they didn't. But they kind of worked on it to the point where we got to this. Now this is basically the Ornette Coleman quartet, but it's under Blood Ulmer's name. Blood Ulmer wrote all of the songs, but it's all very harmonic. Blood Ulmer adopted Ornette's harmonic system, which is where everybody solos over the same melody, but it doesn't have to be in the right key, I think it means. I'm not sure. Nobody does. James Blood, Ornette Coleman, Jamaluddin Takuma on electric bass. First time I heard him too, and that was an eye-opener. And Donardo Coleman, who, to quote Robert Christgau, can no more get on the one than he can lead a gamelan ensemble. And I'm happy to report that Ornette isn't great on this. He's kind of floppity-flop. He's a much better drummer now. He's a very good drummer now. And in the later Ornette records that he produces and plays drums on, he's exemplary. I saw him live on the Virgin Beauty tour, and he was really cool. So he gets kind of bugged because he played on a record when he was 10, and he didn't know how to play the drums. This is a weird one. Blood Ulmer did a record for Rough Trade, so there you are with the raincoats and the the red Crayola and the fall. And there's Blood Ulmer, Amin Ali, Ronald Shannon Jackson, G. Calvin Weston, David Murray, Oliver Lake, Olu Dara. When Olu Dara was a jazz trumpet player, he kind of changed. This is a great record, RCA Studios. I can't remember what label it came out on in the States, or even if it did. But these two were the two kind of records that kind of got the people talking. And so, of course, it had to happen. He got signed to a big label. You betcha! Columbia shows up and they do this record. This record is pretty simple. It's basically him, Amin Ali, and G. Calvin Weston. But on a couple of records, it's those three plus Ronnie Drayton. And a host of background vocalists. This is always to give you a warning. David Murray plays on one song with Oliver Lake and Olu Dara. So it's kind of the same as the Rough Trade record as far as the band, but it's a little bit more concise. And the hype that went with this record was a little bit annoying because he was consistently referred to as being sort of the next Jimi Hendrix. And I mean, maybe as far as changing the way guitar is perceived in the world, perhaps, but their playing styles are completely and utterly different. Other than they play electric guitar and they both possessed a working wah-wah pedal, there's nothing in common between those two guys. So that always drove me crazy. That's the next Hendrix. Second record came out, couldn't even get it in Canada. Like, they didn't try very hard with this guy. This is a great record. It's a bit more rock, as you might expect, being called black rock. Ronnie Drayton's all over this. G. Calvin Weston and Cornell Rochester. Lots of double drum songs. Oh, you gotta like it. Yeah, Ronnie's on almost every song. Is there any sax players? Anyway, I had to pay a lot of money for this as an import. And then after they did the two, they're sort of all about the same kind of thing. The second one's a bit more of a band with a rock thing. Then he goes and throws us this curveball. Now, this is his best record. And I dare say, I don't want to say it's his best band, but the purity of the conception of this record, it is a record with Blood on guitar, vocals, what's his name again? Warren Benbow on drums, and I can't read without my glasses. It's not very big print. Charles Burnham, is it? Charles Burnham. Yeah. So it's a trio. No bass player. Blood plays the bass with his thumbs. And he does a version of Are You Glad to Be in America, which is on, his Rough Trade record. So he ties the past together with this trio, and this is a really, really good record. It's A+, most amazing combination of fusion. Like, if you want real jazz fusion, here you go. Because this has got it all. It's got this sort of, the fiddle, it's electric violin, and it gets this sort of Middle Eastern kind of thing going. And it's really hard to describe. You've got to hear it. There's a live record with this band somewhere that's not as good, and I think they only really did the one record, and then I think it was kind of a part-time band for him. My last record by Blood Ulmer on record is this one, and this is a typical, this was a great idea in theory. Blue Note, Bruce Lundvall got a bunch of guys in to, I'm sure Bruce Lundvall is involved in this. Yeah. And he got Bill Laswell to come in and produce it. And so, unfortunately, Bill Laswell insisted on being the bass player, which is okay. He's an okay bass player. He's playing 4, 6, and 8 string basses, Blood Ulmer on guitar, Ronald Shannon Jackson on drums. And Shannon Jackson, Nicky Scopelitis plays 12-string guitar and banjo. And then there's some background vocalists again on, what's it called again? Show Me Your Love, America. America, do you remember the love? So this is kind of his super compromise record. It's got some free funk, if you would want to call it. It's got a couple of songs. He's a pretty good singer, and he's got that really thick, phlegmy voice. I'm just gonna see if his. I've also got his. I got a lot of weird stuff by him that is pretty interesting. Where am I? We're getting into critical mass here, folks. Oh yeah, this. Yeah, this, a friend, my dear friend, may he rest in peace, Chris Buck, former bassist of Shovelhead, passed away actually a long time ago now, gave me this because he bought it. He thought he was going to love it. And it's really weird record. It's a string quartet with Blood Ulmer playing guitar and singing. DIW in Japan put it out. I'm really glad to own this. And it was really nice of Chris to give it to me because he went, I can't make head nor tail out of it, but I know that you'll like it. And so he gave it to me. And I think of him every time I pull that out, which isn't a lot of the time because it is pretty strange. And then there's this. What year is this? 2003? This is the Memphis Sessions. Now this is where he tried pretty hard to kind of be blues, I guess. And it's like a lot of his records. I remember I thought I had more of his records. Oh, I've got the Music Revelation Ensemble records, which was his band with Ali was in it, and I think Calvin Weston was in it, and a rotating bunch of sax players. Julius Hemphill, Hamid Blewett, I think David Murray's on one. Anyway, he did a lot of great stuff. Some of it wasn't so hot. He did a couple of records. I know he did one on Bellafon in Germany, and I bought it, and I was appalled how bad it was. And I got rid of it. Toot sweet. I think he was capable of making poor decisions, business-wise, and apparently he was. I don't think he toured for a little while, but he left a legacy of terrific stuff, and he truly was a great guitar innovator. I mean, as far as changing the course of guitar, especially of the electric guitar, in the early 80s maybe, he was a real significant figure. So there's our second guy, and he was, I felt, I was sad when I heard that. And then there was this guy, and now there's a lot of talk about good old Clive Davis. Now, I don't care what you think of Clive Davis. To say that he did not alter, Western music in a major way is just nuts. He was a really interesting guy in that he was a typical New York Jewish lawyer in the early 60s, and he was not a hip guy. He was not much of a music fan. He was a lawyer. And he was trying to, find a place for himself in the legal world. And one thing led to another. He wound up being in the legal department of Columbia Records. And in the way that these things seem to happen, he, through a whole bunch of machinations, which are detailed in this book, which is part one of his life, he ended up being assigned to be the head of Columbia Records because nobody else seemed capable of doing it. And the previous people had proven themselves hopelessly inept. And so, without really knowing much about anything, he kind of went out and started sort of power signing. And he signed like Donovan. I think it was his first big signing. But if you know, the 60s is basically everybody that he signed. Santana and Janis Joplin and Chicago and Dylan and, you know, basically he ran Columbia Records from 1966, I guess, until I think it was 72. And he signed everybody. Not only did he sign people, some of them were busts. Moby Grape and, you know, the Rowans is an interesting, he mentions the Rowans in his book, who I'll bet nobody remembers. But he just knew what was going to sell, and he kind of knew how to promote it. Now, he had Columbia Records promotion department did work for him, so, you know, they could really pound something. But he was also a really great talent. What's the word I'm thinking of? He was a talent, like he would raid other companies, and so one artist he raided was Neil Diamond, and Neil Diamond was on MCA. He wasn't happy there, and he kind of slid in and bang, there you go. Another artist that he poached, he was a poacher, that's the word I was thinking of. He poached Pink Floyd from EMI after EMI had put out Dark Side of the Moon. So these were real coups, but, and it's not crystal clear, but all of a sudden, in 73, I think it might have been, CBS fired him. Like, escorted him out with guards, you know, and there was much talk about misspending company money on things like the big rumors he paid for his son's Bach Mitzvah out of company money, which, you know, you wonder how much that cost, and for the amount of money he was making them, whether they should have maybe just let that one slide. But there was also apparently a connection with sort of mobsters and drug dealers being involved in the promotions department, and there's no hard evidence that Clive knew anything about this, although there's probably lots of evidence that he didn't really want to know about it. So, I mean, that's how the rock and roll business worked in those days. When you got up to Columbia Records, you kind of had to be careful. You know, like Buddha Records could get away with stuff like that. But Columbia is like where people like Miles Davis and Vladimir Horowitz are. And so they fired him, and it was very sudden, and it was very brutal. And he, you know, and so once he was allowed to, he wrote this book, and I highly recommend this book. He talks about, there's some great moments. He talks about Sly Stone, Clive trying to get Sly's new record out of him, and Sly is just so high, like he's higher than high. His relationship with Miles Davis is also quite humorous, and there's just it's you know, it's anecdotal. It's a good book. It's not that hard to find in paperback in the thrift stores and stuff, and it's worth reading if you want to get a bit of insight into especially the record industry of the 60s. There's a great moment in here. I know you noticed I had the Delete Dollar Brand record with the corner cut off. Well, Clive kind of invented the Delete, because when he took over at Columbia, he noticed that they were putting out records in both stereo and mono. And he was like, boy, that's like double the inventory. And he went to his technical boffins and he says, now, can you actually not play a stereo record on a monophonic record player? And they go, no, you can, it's no problem. Just won't come out in stereo. But it won't damage the record. No. Well, then we're not going to make any more mono records. We'll just stop. Because they had to make new covers, and it was double the work. So overnight, they deleted all the mono records in the world. And lucky me, I was 8, maybe 7. I ended up with the Wilco delete bins filling up with all these mono records for like 50 cents, which I could afford. And so I was buying things like the Kinks and stuff like that, and in mono. It's great. But it was smart. It must have saved them a lot of money. So he went, licked his wounds. He got nailed with a really kind of nothing income tax evasion charge. Oh, you didn't declare, I don't know, $80,000. Hardly the stuff of, giant scandals. And I think it was more that Columbia just didn't want to have any perception to the government that they were doing anything illegal, and so they just fired him out of sort of panic. That's my kind of take on it. At any rate, he bided his time and ultimately got a deal from a weird place, Columbia Pictures. Now, Columbia Pictures has not anything to do with CBS. It's a separate Columbia. The record business is full of these things. And they had a record label called Bell. Bell was a pretty lame label. They had a hit here and a hit there. But it was mostly like a pop label. What's his name? Tony Orlando and Dawn. And Seals and Crofts were originally on Bell. But it was a kind of a nothing label. They did a few English acts. Susie Quattro. And the Bay City Rollers, I think, were on Bell. But at any rate, they gave him a lot of money, or at least a huge reserve of money, and told him to build a world-class record label out of Bell. So he took a look at Bell. He got rid of everybody on the label except for Barry Manilow and I think it was Melissa Manchester. Although I think Susie Quattro showed up on Arista, so maybe that's not true. Anyway, and he started Arista, which apparently means the best. And he really went for it. He did, and he was funny this way. Now, I can guarantee you Clive Davis knew jack shit about modern jazz, but he got a guy in his fold, Steve Backer, and he got Steve Backer to set up a innovative jazz label, side label of Arista, and that was Arista Freedom. And right from the get-go, they put out stuff like that Dollar Brand by Barry record, which was a pretty weird record. And in Canada, that came out through EMI. EMI was distributing Arista. So it was major distribution for things like Anthony Braxton, which is really, it takes guts. And I can't believe they made any money on the Arista Freedom label. I don't think did they have anything that sold? I don't think so. They signed Gil Scott-Heron, which was a weird one because I don't think he sold either. But it was, he wanted it to look classy, I guess. And like they knew what they were doing. But ultimately, when you look at Arista turned into the home of Whitney Houston and the sort of American Idol crowd. And that's what you get in the second book, The Soundtrack of My Life. And I barely got through this book because I quite honestly don't like most of these artists. But he did things like he took Aretha Franklin, who was absolutely dead in the water, and Jerry Wexler, God love him, he couldn't do anything. He didn't know what to do. And so Clive signed her, hooked her up with Narada Michael Walden, and she had a pile of massive hits, which made all of us feel great, even though they were okay. They were pop music. They were lightweight. And he got the Kinks, out of the doldrums, because they were doing all this pretentious garbage on RCA. And he brought the Kinks back, and he made them really popular, and they had their most popular records. But if you talk to anybody about the Kinks, none of those records are considered their best records. They're kind of like, oh yeah, well at least, the Grateful Dead. Same thing. He picked up the Dead of all bands. And the Dead had tried to do their own record label, and they were just completely hapless. And he made them. They got their biggest single ever out of him. So Clive knew what he was doing. And then there's Outcast, the whole LaFace label thing. He was very, really, really successful, and he had a thing. I think it was partly he had a good nose for music, but also he knew how to apply pressure to boost a particular. Like if he got an artist, if he got an artist in his bonnet that he wanted to, he would really work it hard, and as often as not, it would work. I'm trying to think of artists that Clive loved that just he couldn't make him fly. There's a great story about Iggy Pop signing with Clive for CBS, and Iggy goes in and kind of does a little soft shoe and sings him "The Shadow of Your Smile," and Clive was like, okay, fine. I think he gave him a 2-album deal, which they reneged on the second album. But later when he had Arista going, I don't think Clive knew about it until he'd signed him, but their English operation in Arista, England, had a guy that loved Iggy, and Iggy was available, so he signed him to a 3-album deal for Arista. And Clive was like, oh God, you mean I got Iggy again? And yeah, that yielded some good records, although none of them sold very much. And then, of course, pretty much the second Iggy left, he had a big hit with Wild Child. But you can't win them all. But Clive Davis, there's much. I was trying to find out about these controversies. He's an evil man, apparently. Now, I said, okay, fine, what did he do? Well, nobody wants to come out and say in plain language exactly what he actually did. So there's he killed Whitney. Really? How did he kill Whitney? Well, so there's nobody's saying anything even remotely specific, which leads me to believe there was one thing I heard, and I've been trying to follow this up, that one of the things he did was he helped create or set up or whatever Philadelphia International Records, which is a strictly black label from Philly. The market was black, the artists were black, Tom Bell, Gamble and Huff, all black guys, and it got major distribution through CBS and did quite a lot of business, like millions of records, with Me and Mrs. Jones by Billy Paul was a massive hit, and the OJs had some big hits, and they did good business, and they also acquired the Stax label, and that didn't do as well, and it kind of, I'm not sure of the exact thing, and there's fingers being pointed about how Clive just let them die on the vine because he didn't want them to succeed, but that just doesn't sound like Clive, because Clive didn't care what it was, he wanted it to succeed, at least if it had his name on it. So I'll believe all that when I see more compelling evidence. And as far as I'm concerned, Clive was a brilliant record executive. He was his own biggest fan. He was the exact polar opposite of, say, Mo Austin. He was sort of halfway between Mo Austin, maybe, and Ahmet Ertegun. But he wasn't a flash in the pan. And the fact that he started out, when you look at the major record people, Ahmet Ertegun was a record nut from a child almost, like he was nuts about music. Sam Phillips, crazy about music. The guys that started the record labels really loved the music. Clive didn't really care about music. He was into Broadway shows and stuff. And he learned to love it. It's a funny thing. And I would have loved to imagine what Clive would have made of Miles Davis shows in 1972. But he did it, and he did it well. And when he got knocked down by the industry that he helped build, he got back up and just built another label. And, ended up on top. He came out as bisexual when he was 80, which I thought was interesting. I thought maybe he just needed to stay in the news. But yeah, whatever. It's like when Geffen came out as bisexual, it was like, okay, good. So there you have it. 3 major losses. 3 major deletions to our record-making catalog. And I'm going to miss them all. Well, I'm not going to miss Clive because he wasn't doing anything. He was pleasantly retired, and he's probably gone on to his just reward. Blood was pretty much retired. And I think Dollar Brand was still... Well, I know he was here 2 years ago. So I think his death was rather more unexpected. Great men all. There you have it. Thanks for watching. And don't forget to like and subscribe and all that other stuff. And we'll keep... hopefully I'll keep these... I'm going to condense these into these deletion episodes. Because if I dwell... Literally every few days somebody passes where I go, ah. So, you know, you try not to let it bother you. I try to play a song by them whenever I find out. So that's what we'll do. Thanks for watching. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you later.